All right, sorry about the delay, guys. We had a last minute location change here. We were supposed to be doing it like in the dining hall, but it got a little bit too noisy, so now I'm outside. All right, so welcome everyone to LEC 101. It's nice to see you all here. Let me get my presentation up so all of you can see it as well. All right. So, can all of you guys see the presenting screen? Yes? No? Maybe? Awesome. Thank you, Francis. If you guys have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to unmute yourselves. If you have anything to add, unmute yourselves. Put it in the chat, whatever you want to do. If you have any questions, same thing. So if you guys want to talk during this and contribute to it, that's perfectly fine, and that would actually be great. So if you have any questions to start off with, now's your time to ask. All right. So before we get started, a couple of things. If you haven't already, go to our website and check out all of the special events that we have going on. And that website is live.conclave.oa-c4.org. We have all kinds of really cool stuff on there and all of our program events that are happening this afternoon. And you guys can obviously see all of the trainings that are going on there as well. So feel free to do that. Be engaged in the program. It's going to be a great weekend. I look forward to all the good stuff that's going on this afternoon. It'll be fun. So other than that, we're currently here at MVSR, the Muskegon Valley Scout Reservation. It's a really nice camp. Unfortunately, you guys can't be here as well, but the staff is here, and it's all good. So we're going to be starting with the presentation now. Welcome to LEC 101. My name is Ethan Ventling. I'm currently serving as the section secretary for C4, and then I'm also the immediate past secretary for Marnock as of last week. So yeah. So first off, the question is what are we going to be learning? What are we talking about during our time together? So first off is we're going to talk about what the function of the LEC is, what it is that the LEC has to do, and what we are there to accomplish. The other thing we're going to talk about is who's going to be taking part in the LECs. Every lodge is different, and they do it in a different way. So we're going to talk about some of the different ways lodges in our section here do their LECs. We're going to talk about a little bit how you can organize an LEC, whether it's how you're going to be getting people together or how you're structuring your LECs while you are together. And then the last thing we're going to talk about is some of the best practices. And I'd like to make it more of an open conversation for you guys to join in and talk about your own LECs. So first off is what is an LEC? The LEC is the committee that brings everything together, discusses it, and makes all of the large decisions for the lodges. So if you are having to decide, what are we going to do a calendar change? That's something that the LEC takes care of. If you're going to be deciding what's going to be our annual budget, how much does each committee get to put on their specified program, that's what the LEC is there to decide. So it's not necessarily to plan everything out. That's what the committee chairs or the vice chiefs are supposed to be doing. But they're there to make the big decisions and to assist the vice chiefs or chairmen if they need any help with it. And the other really important thing as far as what an LEC is it's what the next generation of lodge officers is going to be. So usually when you have your elections and for your lodge offices, it's going to be someone within the LEC already that's going to step up into a position. And so when we look at an LEC and when we look at who we want as a chairman, really what we're looking for is who do we want our next lodge leaders to be? So usually a chairman will then become a officer of some sort, and they will help lead the lodge for the next generation of airmen. So the question is what do we do at an LEC? So one thing that I really like about Erie-Lenon as well as SIPO Lodge is before their LECs, they have a working session. And so they'll take their agenda for the LEC and they'll discuss everything before they actually go to the LEC. And they'll bring up different solutions for the problems that they have. So if it's a matter of what's our theme going to be for our fall fellowship, then they're going to talk about that during their working session so they can get it figured out, so they don't have a big discussion during their LEC, so they can take care of matters that have more to do with the entire LEC as opposed to only program. So if they have to talk about a budget, they're going to talk about that during their LEC. They're going to talk about their program during their working session. Another thing I like is when LECs are structured. It makes it really easy. We have a afternoon bell here. So another thing that we have at the LECs that makes them very useful is when they're structured. It makes it so that you don't have 50 people talking at one time and you only have one person at a time. So something that you open an LEC up with is the call to order. So after that, one person at a time for discussing things. The thing that you'll have after your call to order is you'll have old business, new business, all of the things that you already have to talk about. And then if you have anything else that you want to add into the agenda, there's a place for that. And we'll get into this a little bit later as well. The other thing we're going to be talking about a little bit later is voting. So how does voting work in your guys' lodges as far as the LEC? Some lodges, it's only the officers. Some, it's only the chairman. It all depends on what you're doing. All right. So moving on, we have who has a vote. So I know that I think it might be Netawatwees, although I could be wrong on that. Anyone who shows up to their LEC gets a vote. I know that a while ago, I think Marnock was structured the same way too. If a youth airman shows up at an LEC, then they get a vote on what the LEC is talking about. So that's one way to do it. One way that I like to do it is having both the chairman and the officers, so everyone who has a say in it gets a vote. This is the way that Marnock is currently structured, as well as I believe Erie Lenon. And I'm sure SIPO is similar as well, although I could be wrong on that. So all chairmen on the LEC, so no matter what their position is, they get a vote. The way that the section has it structured for what we call the COCs, which is basically an LEC for the section level, is we have it where all of the officers of the section have a vote. So the section chief, vice chief, and secretary, as well as all of the lodge chiefs, have a vote. I know that in some lodges, I'm not sure if we have any in our section, but I know they have them out west in the western region, is only the chapter chiefs have a vote. So the lodge chief is there to facilitate it, and the lodge officers are there to present the ideas, but the chapter chiefs are the ones who get the vote. So the point of having the chapter chiefs vote, and only them, is to make it so that you would have to have a functioning chapter program in order to have a functioning lodge program. So that's one way to think about it. So how do we run an LEC, and what is the methodology that we use when we do it? So I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it, at least formally, but we have what's called Robert's Rules. So whenever we go into an LEC or any kind of a meeting in the Order of the Arrow, they're usually run by Robert's Rules. So some things that you have in Robert's Rules is you have your call to orders, you have motions, seconds, you have adjournments, you have calls to votes, all of those good things. And the point of it is so that you have a structured meeting to where you don't have 100 people talking at a time. You don't have a bunch of different opinions all being talked about at the same time. Makes it so that everyone can be heard when their opinion is being discussed. And it also allows for like questions and answers to whoever is giving the presentation. And it makes it so that it's very structured so that you can have a progressive discussion. So you can get things done a little bit easier in most cases. And so whenever you have something to vote on, you do a motion, and then someone will have to second it. Then the chief will call for a discussion on the matter and say, what does everyone have to say about this? And after the discussion is over, then he will call for a vote. And everyone who has a vote votes. Are there any questions so far, or any comments? Anyone? All right. So, moving on. How often should we have an LEC? So, different lodges will do them different ways. So, Marnock has them monthly. So, every month the LEC gets together. Traditionally, we used to have them in person, but because of everything that's going on now, we have them online. And so we have them monthly, and we talk about pretty much the same things every month just to make sure we're all up to date on things. And it makes it so that the communication is always flowing. The downside to this would be you have to have them monthly and everyone has to show up. So it makes it more of a time commitment and something that people have to put in their schedules more. So that is one option of doing it. Another way you can do it is having them quarterly. So back before all of the lodge mergers that happened in 2017, I know that Wapashui, one of the lodges that was merged into Marnock, had them quarterly. So at each quarter of the year, they would schedule an LEC and they would discuss all of the big items that they had. So one thing with monthly meetings is you have a lot of small items that you just take care of monthly. But then when you have a quarterly meeting, you have to have a lot more time on that day that you have your LEC because you have to take care of more business, and usually they're bigger items. They require more discussion. One way that Erie-Lenon has their LECs is they have them at events. So they have them outside of events as well, but those are not as common. But at every single event that Erie-Lenon has, at the end of it, they have a LEC. And so they can discuss anything that they think went either really well or didn't go that well. So they can do a start, stop, continue of their event. They can see this is where we can get better. And they can also discuss anything else that they would have, like a budget or how they're going to do their next event. Whatever it might be, they can do it at the event. And one thing that I really like about this is all of your LEC members should already be at the events. And so you aren't having to get everyone back together again the week afterwards to have a LEC, and you aren't having to make even more meetings for everyone. You can just take care of it while you're already together. Another way that some lodges do this, and I personally would not recommend this to you, but some of the really large lodges geographically only have LECs annually to set their budget and take care of their events. And so if you have a really large lodge to where someone has to drive 9 hours from one side of the state to the other, then you only have them annually. And then you have all of your chapter meetings in order to take care of all of the other business. So it doesn't really apply here in our section because we don't live 9 hours apart most of the time. But annually, if you would like to do it that way, you can. Do we have any questions, any comments, or any concerns? All right. So, moving on. How can we get new airmen involved? So, there's a couple of different ways. One thing that I find that works rather well is doing like an elevator speech. So whenever you are at a lodge event or a chapter event or just see anyone that you know is in the lodge, you can talk to them and be like, hey, you should join our LEC, and give a 60-second presentation on why they should join the LEC. So that's the point of the elevator speeches. You're on an elevator ride with someone and you have 60 seconds to convince them to join whatever you are discussing with them. So I know that we do this with like NYLT in our councils. Is you get your NYLT trainers and they go out to their units and they give elevator speeches to every scout that they see. We can do the same thing with the Order of the Arrow, to where whenever we want to talk to someone about, hey, this is what you should do in our order. You should join the LEC. You should go to OA High Adventure, whatever it is. You can give them a quick 60-second presentation and say, this is what we do, and this is why you should come and join us. So at all of your lodge events and things like that, if you're already on the LEC, you can present to the rest of your members and say, hey, this is what you guys should be doing. Another thing that I really like about Marnock, and I know that Erie Lenon does this as well, I'm pretty sure SIPO does it, is at all of their ordeals, after the ordeal is over, they get their candidates together and they give them a presentation on what's coming up in the lodge. So whether it's like a winter banquet or a fall fellowship, whatever it might be, they give a nice PowerPoint presentation, or they just talk to them, say, this is what's coming up, and this is why you should come. And we give them flyers and things like that. We can include in there, this is what the LEC does, and this is how you can get involved. So you can get your lodge chief to go and talk to your candidates and say, hey, this is what my job as the lodge chief is within our lodge, and this is how you can help me accomplish it. Another thing that I think works rather well is patches. So when you incentivize things, people come to, join your organization more. So one thing that Marnock does is we had LEC patches to where we could made little dangle patches to where you can put it on your uniform, and it says Marnock Lodge LEC, and it has the our totem on it. And so one thing you guys can do is make patches for your LEC and give them away at a winter banquet, or just give them whenever they sign up to be a chairman or an officer. One thing that SIPO does that I really enjoy is they have special events for their LEC. So whether this is a LLD that you have, which is a Lodge Leadership Development, where you give presentations in regards to what the LEC does, and like how to budget, how to plan program, and things like that. You can have that at a special event. And so one thing that SIPO did, I think a year or two ago, is they went to like a trampoline park, and they gave their members this the presentations. Then they had a nice event afterwards, and they fed them and all that good stuff. And so if you guys put your LEC and you give them special events that they can go to and kind of develop as a team, then I think that that works really well as far as communication wise, to help them communicate better with each other, because they're more likely to talk outside of the actual LEC meetings if they're friends than if they just work with someone. So special events really help bring LECs together, and it helps improve your program and sometimes gives you good ideas. Another thing that Marnock does is they give food to their LEC members. So whenever we have a LEC or a weekend event for the LEC, or our lodge leadership development that we do every year, we feed our LEC pretty well. So during the summer, in our summer LECs, we have hamburgers or hot dogs that we'll cook in the parking lot, and then we'll eat those before the LEC and then go and take care of our business. The other thing we do at summer camp is we have our ice cream socials. Except for this year, we didn't have our LECs there, but we have ice cream socials, and then our LEC will get together and discuss anything that needs done. Is there anything else anyone would like to add? Going once? Going twice? All right. So we're having some more people join now. So welcome to the training. And if you guys would like, we can stick around a minute afterwards, and I can go over anything else that you guys missed. So yeah. So moving on, we're going to be talking about how can we work around COVID-19, and what can we do to kind of make our LECs work and make it so we can continue to function as an LEC, even though we can't always get together. And obviously the things that everyone has been doing lately is all of our online meetings. So personally, my favorite one so far, it's called Cisco WebEx, and they have a bunch of extra tools that go along with it. And the thing that I enjoy about it is you can format it to where it specializes in sharing videos with people. So you can actually play and stream videos through the WebEx meeting and it doesn't lag. Something that you can't really do with Google Meetings, and I haven't figured out how to do with Zoom yet, is actually share those videos. Zoom's really good for larger meetings to where it can hold quite a few people. The only problem is there's a time limit on it unless you pay for it. And one really nice thing with Google Meetings is it's free. I believe there's a time limit on it, but I'm not sure. I haven't hit one yet. But Google Meetings, I enjoy that, and that's what our LEC uses. And then we use Zoom for all of our section meetings. So any questions, any comments, or any concerns? All right. So next, now that no one has any questions, I'm going to open this up for a discussion, and I'd like to hear some of your guys' best practices as a lodge and as an LEC. Would anyone like to volunteer? All right. So let's see. Mr. Walters, would you mind unmuting?
I knew you were going to call on me.
Well, if you didn't volunteer, I didn't have much of another choice. So, Mr. Walters, would you like to share something that you enjoy about Marnock's LEC and the way that they do things?
I do like when we are able to get together. It is very much a community of people that we share a lot of things, be it like, as you said, cooking, with Mr. Cosmit's cooking out, and that's always a lot of fun. We've had some LECs in the dining hall during events. That's always been fun. I do like the idea of meeting beforehand, as you mentioned, that maybe we could try and incorporate that in somehow. But I just like how the lodge has been run. It has been rather organized lately. We had some trouble times once we merged, but it's become a really good group. There hasn't been as much turnover lately, and that's a very good thing. And that's one thing we, as an LEC, you want to strive to keep is the same people. Try and keep as many active as possible in the same positions, and only try to replace them when you absolutely must. That's a pretty critical thing, I think.
Yeah. All right. Anyone else?
How's that?
So I'll throw it at you for Tecumseh Lodge. We've picked up our LEC meetings recently because this month we'll be holding our third ordeal of the year. And basically the Tuesday before, we've been doing a Zoom style LEC in prep for the ordeal weekend. And I think that's been working out pretty well.
Yeah. All right. Does anyone else have anything to add? Mr. Crow, you are the lodge advisor for Onondaga, correct? Oh, he's left the meeting. All right. So I was going to ask him about how Onondaga's LECs are structured, because every lodge is different in the way they do them. So if anyone in here is from Onondaga, feel free to speak up. If not, then we can move on. Going once? Going twice? All right. So I was hoping for a little bit more of a discussion. So this is the end of my presentation, but I can keep talking for quite a while. So we're going to end probably around 12:40, 12:45, just to keep things rolling for our schedule here. But in the meantime, I can talk about some of my experiences on the LEC. So back in 2014, I joined the Order of the Arrow, and then I started working on the LEC in 2015 as an ordeal chairman. So I've been on quite a few LECs in two different lodges, the first one being Wapashui and the second one being Marnock. So one thing that I enjoyed about Wapashui's not ordeals, but their LECs, is all of the people on them had a vote. So all of the chairmen and all of the officers. And the other thing I enjoyed was whenever they would set up their LECs for their tables and their seats, they would have their one main table with all of the youth at it. And the chief would sit at the head of the table. And then they would set up chairs along the outside of the room for all of the lodge advisors and associate advisors to sit in. And so the only people who were allowed to talk at the LECs, unless it was something very important, was the youth of the lodge. So the only time that even our lodge advisor would speak up during the LECs was during his lodge advisor minute at the end of it. And so if an adult had anything to add, they would go to their youth and they would just write it down for them. And then they would just give it to them and say, hey, this is something that I think that you should add to the conversation. So that way it was only the youth who were running the meeting, and it was only the youth who were participating in it. And I think that that's something that worked rather well for Wapashui and helped make it more youth run. So that's something I really enjoy. So if you guys would like to consider doing that, feel free. So that's one thing. Another thing that I really enjoy about Marnock is they have all of their chairmen and officers at the front of the room, and then all of the adults sit in the back, and then they say anything that they need to, and they're there to support the youth, and they're there to make sure that everyone stays on the same page. And so if the meeting ever gets out of hand, or if a bunch of people start talking, then one thing that helps out is the adults are there to guide the youth back on track and make sure things keep rolling. Does anyone else have anything to add? I don't want to take up the whole conversation. All right. Going once?
I do like having the idea of the youth sitting at tables. We always typically try to have them in a circle or square, so that the youth are talking to each other and not out to the adults. The advisors are there for just that. They are there to advise. And I do not, I like having the lodge advisor, the associate lodge advisor, and all the other advisors in the back of the room. We're there to guide. We're there to advise. But it's a youth-led group, and that's exactly how it should be.
Yeah. So another thing that I'll talk about briefly is a LEC should have an agenda. Typically, the lodge chief will draft the agenda beforehand, and he is supposed to send it out to whoever is going to be attending the LEC, so everyone knows before they get there, this is what we're supposed to be talking about, and they can be prepared for the conversation. So if it's going to be about a lodge budget, then each chairman who comes should know this is what my budget is, and this is what I'm going to need for my budget. And so if your lodge chief isn't sending out your LEC notes, that might be something that you guys could improve in your lodge. So you want to make sure that everyone has the copy of the LEC agenda, so everyone knows what's going on. And then afterwards, whoever your secretary is in your lodge, or whoever's your vice chief of communications, or whoever it might be assigned to, should be taking all of your meeting notes or your minutes and adding them to the agenda, and then sending it back out after the LEC is over for anyone who missed the LEC. So that way, everyone stays on the same page, even if they missed the LEC. So I would suggest that to all of you. One thing that I think Marnock could improve on is we do send out the agenda before the LEC even starts. And then as the LEC is going on, we put the minutes inside of the agenda. The only problem with that is we never resend it out, so it reappears in someone's email. So once the LEC is over, hardly anyone ever goes back to the minutes to review them. And so one thing that I think we could do better as a lodge is making sure that those get sent back out. So just as a reminder to everyone, hey, this is what we talked about. Any comments, questions?
No, that's a good thing. I wouldn't mind seeing that happen myself.
Anything else? All right. So if you guys don't mind, I'll go off topic just a tiny bit and talk about lodge leadership developments. So is that good with you guys? Okay. So a lodge leadership development, typically they happen once a year. Some lodges do them more often, but you only have to do them once a year. It's part of the, LLP metrics that they came out with this year. Yeah, lodge leadership. I forget what the acronym is, but the metrics that we judge by, it used to be JTE, but now it's the new one with the thriving and high performing lodges, is you have to have your lodge leadership development and have a certain percentage of your entire lodge there to participate in it. And so one thing that I would recommend to you guys is the National Order of the Arrow on their website under their resources tab has a training archive. So all of the trainings that have been done at the past two NOACs, so NOAC 2015 and 2018, as well as special LLD trainings and the ACT conference trainings and a couple of other ones, are all on the website. So anything that you guys could possibly want some kind of training about in the OA is on that website. So when it comes time to plan the LLDs, you guys can go there and get a pretty good idea of what should be discussed and what you can discuss. One thing that I enjoy about the website is you can go to a special page for LLD specifically, and you can enter what your lodge is and what council you're in and what region you're in, and it'll come up with a specified list of programs and trainings that you can do as a lodge based on your previous metrics from the last year. So if you go on the website and you put in what lodge you're from, you can see what the metrics were for your lodge. So how many people came to your events percentage wise of your entire lodge, how many people got their brotherhood in your lodge. And so it gives you specified trainings to help you meet the next, the higher standard for your metrics. So any questions about that? Any comments or concerns? All right. So moving on a little bit past the trainings of the LLDs is what you guys can do for your LLDs. So as I mentioned a little bit earlier, SIPO usually puts their LLDs with some other event. One thing that they do every year, I think it's S cubed. So yeah, I think it's S cubed, is they'll take an entire Saturday afternoon and get together as a LEC. And then Toby Hoy, their lodge advisor, will go through their metrics and say, how can we improve this? And how can we improve this? And he'll get large poster board paper, and then he'll tape it up all around the room with start, stop, continues of every single thing that their lodge does. And so if it's, for instance, if it's the food at the ordeal, it's going to have an entire poster board paper only for doing start, stop, continues of ordeal food. Or if it's about their ceremonies, every single thing that their lodge does is going to get reviewed at S cubed. So that way, if there's anything that's just like a tradition of the lodge that isn't really helping them be a high performing lodge, or even might be just taking up too much work or time, then they'll look at it once a year and they'll say, is this something that's really worth doing? Or can we do this better? Or can we just not do this? And so reviewing everything that your lodge does and getting the youth's input on everything that you do and the way that you do it is, in my opinion, a very important thing for the lodges. Any questions? All right. So what else can we talk about for LLDs? I think that's about it, because you have trainings and then you have the events. So some lodges will have them as an entire weekend for the like lodge leadership, to where they get to come Friday night and they'll do a game night, and they'll do, whether it's video games or board games or card games, and then they'll spend the night, have an ice cream social, and then Saturday morning they'll start their LLD, and it'll take the rest of the day, and then they'll have a nice lunch and a nice dinner and go home. So yeah, if there aren't any other questions or comments, then I think that I'll let you guys go. And then for those of you who I let in a little bit late, you guys can stick around and I can give you the first half of the presentation if you would like. So if you guys would like to leave, you're more than welcome to. And if you have any questions, then let me know.
Thank you very much, Ethan.
Thank you, Mr. Walters. All right. So where did everyone come in at? Or who was the first one to come in, that so I can start from there? All right. So I'll just start back from the beginning, and you guys can let me know when you guys came in. And I'll try and go through this quickly so we don't go over time. All right. Let me share my screen real quick. All right. So welcome to LEC 101. My name is Ethan Ventling. These are our learning objectives, so you'll see it as we go on. So the LEC is the committee that makes all of the large decisions for the lodge. It shouldn't be the individual lodge officers going over, it shouldn't be the whole LEC going over every single detail for your events. The lodge officers and the chairman in your lodge should be responsible for the majority of the planning and take care of all of the small details. You don't want to have your entire LEC voting on whether you're going to have green beans or carrots for dinner. You can leave that up to a chairman. The LEC sets the annual budget for each committee to use. It's one of the things that the LEC has to do annually. It's in the the laws of the Order of the Arrow and the Guide to Officers and Advisors. So it's something that we have to do. But most importantly, the LEC is the next generation of the lodge leadership. So whenever you have new people coming into the LEC, those are the people who are most likely going to be stepping up into being a lodge officer. So it's really important when you're choosing who is going to be on your LEC that those are the people who you want to progress in leadership. And so, yeah. All right. So the next thing is who has a vote on an LEC. It depends on which lodge that you guys are from as to how you have it structured. Some lodges will have it where any member in the lodge who shows up to the LEC gets a vote regardless of what their position is. Some will have it to just people who have a seat on the LEC. So it's only the chairman and the officers who have a vote. Some, it's only the lodge officers and their chairman are there just to do their work, and it's just lodge officers who get to vote. And then some lodges, if you get into bigger lodges with a lot more members, it's going to be only the chapter chiefs who have the vote. And so the reason why only chapter chiefs would have a vote in this situation is because it helps promote having functional chapters and chapters that will progress on their own. So chapters that will have their own events, have their own elections, and even have their own ordeal and brotherhood ceremonies. And so the point and the way that chapters would work in that way is the LEC, the people who, the chairman and the officers, would present whatever it is they're going to be voting on to the chapter chiefs, and the chapter chiefs would vote on it, which is very similar to the way that the section is run, to where all of the CVCs and coordinators plan the event and they present it to the lodge chiefs, and then the lodge chiefs have the final say on it. And so if you have a lot larger lodge, then this is one option for you. But most lodges, it's either the officers or it's all of the chairmen. So how often should we have the LECs? So some lodges will have them monthly, which can become tedious at a certain point to where every single month you're going to be, especially in the winter months when not much is going on, you don't have a lot of things to talk about. And so lodges that have the monthly can sometimes have a problem retaining members in the LEC because it just wears them out more because there's more meetings they have to go to. Some lodges will do them quarterly. Marnock does them monthly, and then my previous lodge, Wapashui, did them quarterly, to where 4 times a year they would get together as an LEC and make all of their decisions for the year. I know that Erie Lenon does them only at the events. They have them sometimes outside of the events, but that's not as common. But at every event, they'll do a start, stop, continue of how the event went and what they can change for the next time. And so, in my opinion, it makes it easier to critique what they're doing because everything that they just did is fresh in their minds and they're still thinking about it. The other way that they can do it is doing them annually. If you have a much larger lodge that's spaced out more and you have functioning chapters, you can get away with doing it annually. However, I would not suggest this. Yeah. Next is getting new airmen involved. So one thing that I would highly recommend to all of you is at all of your ordeals, after the ordeal is finished, bringing all of your new members together and showing them and telling them about the work that the LEC does and why that's important. Another way that you guys can incentivize your LEC is with patches. So Marnock Lodge has a special LEC patch that they give to all of their new members. And I think that when you see people walking around with the LEC patch, you're like, what's all that about? And so next, you can have special events for only your LEC. So something that SIPO does, as well as Marnock occasionally, is they'll have special events just for their LEC. So they'll take their LEC out, go to a trampoline park. They'll go play, I think it's called wiffle ball or something like that.
Whirly ball.
Whirly ball, that's what it was. And so they'll go and play whirly ball. They'll have an LEC, and it's just for the members or potentially prospective members of the LEC. And another thing that will keep people active once they're in your LEC is feeding them food. So at Marnock Lodge's LECs in the summer, we cook up a bunch of hamburgers and hot dogs beforehand, and the LEC can kind of hang out and have like some soda or whatever we have in our coolers, and then we'll make up some hot dogs and hamburgers and have like a barbecue. And that really seems to keep people involved. And so I think that this is when I let everyone back in. So is everyone good, or are there any questions? Going once? Going twice? All right, so we are at 10:45, which is when this training is scheduled to close. So keep an eye out on the Conclave website, which is live.conclave.oa-c4.org. And make sure that you guys look at the schedule, see what fun program is going on, and I'll see you all later. Thank you very much.